Hi everyone and welcome back to the garden on another grey and windy day, but we had beautiful sun for most of yesterday and I got plenty done, so I guess I can't really complain. But today I want to look at a group of plants that thrives in these grey cooler conditions, a group of plants that for me really comes into their own in autumn and winter, all the way through to spring, but in reality gives interest all the way around through the year and really adds to a tropical garden, and that's ferns. So from the towering tree ferns behind me, right down to the small ferns I've got dotted throughout the garden, they're one of my favourite groups of plants. And a big thing if you're growing a tropical style garden is that the ferns, they're a trouble-free plant that you can put in that fits the aesthetic but doesn't need a lot of looking after, but generally shouldn't need any winter protection. So I want to go through those now and look at three of my best choices, the strongest growers with a lot of visual interest that can thrive in those tricky shady spots where a lot of other plants can't. So let's start off first with the autumn fern. The first fern that I want to feature then, it's one you'll see me plant in my small tropical shade garden border. There's a link to that video up there. It's this one here, Dryopteris erythrosora, and it's Brilliance, which is a fantastic fern, and the main attraction is these new fronds, which come out a beautiful coppery red colour. This one has started to fade slightly, but on some when they come out they're a really deep red and they absolutely stand out amongst other green foliage. How do I use this fern in the garden then? Well, for me it's a fantastic plant for giving a splash of colour and interest to those really shady, tricky areas at the back of borders and also around the taller plants. So around Trachycarpus palms, around the bamboos, just dotted along the back of fences, and also it's a great plant to put in the front of borders, in shady borders anyway, just to sort of blur the edges. So around the garden here I've got a lot of York stone edges and I've also got some boulders dotted around the place, and this is a great plant for softening them. So in any kind of jungle or exotic tropical style garden, I think you want that element of the wild, you want it to feel natural, and I don't really want to use authentic, but you want to give it that sort of edge that it's slightly softened over and it's been there longer than it has. So for me, ferns, one of the oldest plants on the planet, are a beautiful plant that you can use to actually sort of cover over the edges, to soften them a bit and really give your garden some age and character. So it's a plant I've got dotted around the garden, and when it comes to practical care, like most ferns, like most of the Dryopteris, it is a tough fern. It will prefer somewhere shaded and somewhere wetter, but it will also take a bit of sun. What you find is, if you're growing it in a sunny area, it's more likely to get hit by those frosts in winter because it doesn't have any overhead cover, so it can look a bit rough for most of winter. But if you got it somewhere shaded, it tends to look good pretty much all year round. So the three ferns I'm going to show you today, the last one I'm going to show you isn't especially, well, it's not quite as hardy as this Dryopteris, but they're all generally evergreen in the right spot. And for me, it's worth growing these somewhere that's got that shade, that's got the moist soil to really have them looking their absolute best. The next plant I want to feature is planted down here in the tree fern avenue, which is really just a small area of my garden with a big brick shed on one side and a huge tree on the other one, so it doesn't see a huge amount of direct sun. But it's Dryopteris wallichiana, another Dryopteris, but this one doesn't have that burnished copper colour. Instead, it's a really zingy lime green, and it's a plant that, like all the plants in this video, it can be evergreen, but it looks its best in spring when it's starting to put those new fronds out. And wallichiana is a fantastic fern, these lime green fronds, and they've got real sort of dark bits between them, so it definitely stands out, and it looks perfectly at home here with Hercanicloa grass, with the Schefflera, and with the Dicksonia tree fern at the back. It's one of those plants that it's never going to jump out at you and you go, wow, what's that? But overall, it's a really helpful plant and it helps bring all these other foliage or specimen plants together. If I was trying to sound like a garden designer extraordinaire, I certainly say that the lime green fronds are a perfect sort of match with the Hercanicloa grass, and they're a beautiful contrast to the dark greens. But the reality is, when it comes to greens and creating a jungle look, you can't really go wrong. Get as many different greens as possible, as many leaf sizes, shapes, textures, chuck them all in, and chances are they'll work really well together. Green is just one of those colours that just works fantastically, and it's a perfect backdrop to other brighter colours in the garden. I also grow the Dryopteris wallichiana Jurassic Gold, which is something a little bit different. It's got a nice sort of yellowy golden mix to the fronds, but I think with a lot of these plants, the original green one often is the most striking, and it's such a beautiful colour. But now, those two plants, they're both very tough, very hardy, and capable of growing in places aren't ideal for them. But I want to show you another plant that's maybe not quite as frost hardy, but seems to do alright here, and it's Pteris umbrosa, which is a fern that after my last garden tour video, or the first one I did earlier in the year, I had a lot of people ask about. It's a fantastic looking jungle fern. I don't know the exact hardiness rating, but I find it's best to give it some kind of overhead cover. So I've got a couple planted around the garden. One of them is under some tree ferns, so it's got a bit of overhead cover in winter just to keep those radiational frosts off it. And the other one is planted next to this brick shed, which might not seem much, but any small amount of heat that it absorbs gives it that extra level of protection. And it's a fern that can look a bit tatty after winters here. I suspect if you live in London and you've got maybe quite a sheltered courtyard garden, it will stay green all year round. So whilst it is technically evergreen here, it can look a bit tatty. And what I do is I wait till sort of late winter, early spring, I chop those old fronds off, and within a sort of month, 6 weeks, you get a brand new flush of lovely green fronds. So it's a fantastic looking fern, and it looks completely different to the Dryopteris wallichiana. This one, instead of having small, delicate, feathery leaves, it's got really big, bold leaves that just scream jungle. So it's a fantastic fern, and one that isn't grown, I don't think, widely. So it's a fantastic plant to have that really stands out to add a sort of bit of interest. So for me, the holy grail of plants, of filler plants, is to find something that doesn't take a lot of looking after, that definitely fits in with that jungle look. And this Pteris umbrosa is definitely one of those. Just a quick video today then, a quick look at 3 ferns that grow in the garden here, and I definitely recommend to anyone else, whether it's a tropical garden you're growing or maybe more of a woodland style garden, they'd look absolutely at home in both of them. And for me, they're a perfect fit, a perfect balance to the more natural materials I've got in the garden. So the stone, the York stone, the boulders, and even the red brick of this wall. As it's starting to age and crumble, the ferns look absolutely perfect with it. But there's plenty more ferns available. There's so many different types and kinds. I grow quite a lot of larger ferns that have got some real interest in the garden here, but these are 3 that stay sort of small to medium size, that are perfect for finding a shady home in your garden and really thriving in a spot where a lot of other plants can't. So I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if there's any other ferns that you grow in your garden that you think will look perfectly at home here, then give me a shout and leave a comment below, and I'll certainly look at adding them. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.